Okay, let's stay with that story. Profits have plunged at Cathay Pacific, which is tied to months of political unrest in Hong Kong. But now the airline is one of many facing severe financial turbulence as the spread of the coronavirus disrupts global travel. Hong Kong's national carrier says it's braced for, quote, substantial losses in 2020. It's slashed 2/3 of its international operations and plans to cut most flights to mainland China. Korean Air says it's fighting for survival. It's cutting 80% of its international capacity and is telling employees to take voluntary leave. The Australian carrier QANTAS is slashing a quarter of its international operations for now, saying the slump could cost it up to $100 billion. And low-cost airline Norwegian Air has cut 3,000 flights between March and June, warning of temporary staff layoffs. Matthew Driskill is editor of Asian Aviation, a civil aviation magazine. He joins us from Singapore. Matthew, is it possible to quantify ballpark figures, the cost of this to the airline industry, say per month or per 6 months?
Not per month or 6 months. IATA, the International Air Transport Association, came out about a week ago and said that the airline industry globally could lose anywhere between 63 and 113 billion US dollars if the coronavirus continues. The $63 billion figure was best case scenario, that if it ended tomorrow, that would be the loss figure in revenues, not in profits, but in revenues. And the $113 billion figure was if it continued. That was the extended scenario, as IATA called it.
Any particular carriers that are fiscally well enough insulated to ride the storm on this?
Interestingly enough, the carriers that do not lease aircraft are probably a little bit better off because they don't have to make those lease payments. Airlines that have a lot of leased aircraft, if they can't negotiate different payment terms with the lessors, a lot of whom are in Ireland, then they might be in trouble. There are airlines like Cathay, the big airlines that have consolidated in recent years. A lot of the American airlines, there's basically 3 big carriers there. A lot of those are probably going to be fine. They're definitely going to take revenue hits. They may lose money for a quarter or two. Again, it depends on how long this is going to go on. But then you have other carriers like Hong Kong Airlines in Hong Kong that is looking for a buyer right now.
Is there anything else that the people that, the CEOs that run these, say, the big legacy carriers, because like Lufthansa grounding all their A380s, SAS out of Scandinavia saying, look, we want you to take a 20% pay cut. Are you okay with that? And of course, people want to hang on to their jobs, so they've got to say yes. Is there anything else that the carriers can do to mitigate the losses?
Well, there's a lot they can do. They can fire a lot of people. They can, cut capacity more and all of that, but then you don't have an airline. So I think they're doing everything that they can do at the moment to survive. It was interesting to me when I was reading the results from Cathay, which reported its results today, and they actually made money last year in spite of all the protests in Hong Kong. But it was interesting to me to read in the chairman's statement where he talked about that the cost cuts, the asking of unpaid leave from pilots, from ground staff, from everybody else, he said that would hopefully keep the airline as a going concern. Now, I've covered the Securities and Exchange Commission in the U.S. I've covered business for a long time. And anytime a chairman talks about the fact that we should be able to remain as a going concern, that always wakes me up a little bit because it's very interesting.
Some people on social media, of course, if one follows #aviation on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, people are saying, oh, I got a flight from A to B. It was basically empty. And everyone is saying, we know what the airlines are doing. They want to hang on to those slots because they're so valuable, airline to airline. Does there come a point, if we're having this conversation in 3 or 6 months, does there come a point when the airlines have got to say, OK, yeah, we'll lose the slots. We're going to ground even more aircraft. And at that point, I guess, the world of aviation changes so dramatically.
Well, it's a possibility, and that's a good point. It's a very good question. The good news, and again, IATA, the International Air Transport Association, has basically called for blanket slot relief around the world. They have this 80-20 rule where you have to fly 80% of the flights in order to maintain the slots. The interesting thing is the Airport Council International, which is the trade group for the airports, they say, no, it should be on a market-by-market basis, because if airlines quit flying to those airports, then those airports start losing money. So there's a little bit of an argument going on between the two entities. And again, if airlines just quit flying, I mean, that's going to be a huge problem.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Matthew Driskill there in Singapore, thank you very much.